Welcome to Her Discovered Power, the podcast where we try to provide every single good hearted woman tools and knowledge that can empower and free you from so many of the emotional aspects that impact you most, from our earliest teachings and societal implications. I'm Dave Jones with Captive Coaching and Empowerment, and this is my mission and my passion because of what I've seen happen with the women in my life, including my own mother. We're here to help you be the she that you were meant to be. Hope you follow us, hope you share us, and hope you enjoy the episode.
Well, good morning, David, and welcome back, everyone, to Her Discovered Power. Today, we're going to continue the conversation that we started in last season about deserve. And I really think this conversation is going to resonate with so many women because once you shift into believing that you deserve good things, the next challenge is receiving them. And let me tell you, allowing yourself to receive good things can be hard in the beginning. So, today, that's why we're going to talk about how to receive without guilt, without shrinking. And a big one is without sabotaging the good things that are trying to enter your life. So, David, let's start with the big question. Why is receiving so hard for women?
Well, good morning, Sherry. And for all the good hearted ladies that are listening, this is a big one, Sherry, because the short answer for why did they find it difficult is because receiving requires vulnerability, openness, trust, emotional safety. And for a lot of women, those things feel more dangerous than deprivation. But the essence is that we'll get into is the big part of why. And it comes back to, as so many of our topics do, comes back to conditioning. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were taught to be the givers, the fixers, the to do everything for everyone else first.
Totally spot on, Sherry, because receiving requires you to believe three things, doesn't it? First of all, you have to believe that your needs matter. You have to believe that you're allowed to be present among others. And we have to believe that we're not a burden. And unfortunately, Sherry, most good hearted women were conditioned to believe the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I remember feeling, when I would take my needs seriously, I remember feeling uncomfortable, almost selfish. So I get it.
Oh, absolutely. And, women are taught that their value comes from service, sacrifice, self abandonment, right? So when someone tries to give them something like love or support, even just help, praise, or some type of care, the unconscious emotional mind really interprets it like a danger because it's so foreign and immediately confronts the internal sense of lacking deserving.
Mm. So we automatically reject it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Receiving activates guilt because guilt is an emotional alarm that says you're breaking the rules that we used to have to follow and that we created in those early formative years of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. All of those coping and defense mechanisms that we created so perfectly in those years so that we would be safe as possible within our environment. And then we carry them forward into adulthood, and they are no longer serving us because we're no longer in that same environment. That's why we have to do something about those old rules.
Hmm. Yeah, because we don't even know we're doing it, though.
No, that's exactly right. And that's the entire essence of being able and alerted to what our unconscious emotional mind does and creates for us in our belief systems in a method of attempting to protect us as emotionally safe as possible. But they were formed during those earlier years.
Hmm.
Sherry, I really want to give an allegory that kind of captures what we're talking about that unfortunately impacts so many good hearted women. Okay.
Okay.
There was a woman who had spent most of her life doing everything herself. She carried heavy boxes. She paid the bill before anybody else could reach for it at the table. She insisted she was fine even when she wasn't. That sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. She never asked for help, and she never accepted it when it was offered. Well, one winter, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, slipped on the ice. Well, Beverly, the woman, rushed over, helped her up, and insisted on walking her home. And when they reached the door, Mrs. Alvarez said, "Thank you, dear. I don't know what I would have done without you." Well, Beverly brushed it off and said, "Oh, it's nothing, really." Well, Mrs. Alvarez paused, looked at her in the eyes, and said gently, you don't have to pretend your kindness is some small thing just because you're uncomfortable receiving any in return." Beverly didn't know what to say. Well, the old lady continued and said, "Let me teach you something that my mother taught me. If you refuse to receive, you interrupt the circle. Giving and receiving are the same breath, the inhale and the exhale. You can't live on only one." Beverly didn't know what to say, but something in her kind of changed. And over the next few months, Mrs. Alvarez let the woman help her and insisted on helping back. She brought Beverly soup when she was sick. She watered her plants when Beverly traveled. She left small notes of encouragement on Beverly's porch. At first, Beverly kind of resisted, and then she kind of tolerated it. Then she began to appreciate it. And eventually, Sherry, she learned to receive without flinching, and it had changed her. Well, years later, Beverly noticed a younger coworker, bright and capable and good hearted, overwhelmed young woman. She reminded Beverly of herself, always giving, never receiving, and always insisting she was fine. Well, one afternoon, the coworker stayed late to finish a project, and Beverly walked over and said, "Let me help you with that." Well, the young coworker immediately shook her head and said, "Oh, no, no, I don't want to be a burden." Well, Beverly smiled, soft, numbing smile, and repeated the words once spoken to her. "You are not a burden, and you don't have to live on the exhale." The coworker blinked. She didn't know what she was talking about. Beverly pulled up a chair and said, "Let me teach you something someone once taught me. Receiving doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole." Coworker hesitated and nodded, and it was just like that, Sherry. The circle had continued, one learning to receive and then teaching how to receive. And that's what we have to do.
Mm. It's so powerful. I mean, it gives me goosebumps because we so often minimize ourselves so we don't inconvenient other people. But like in your story, I've learned that people feel good to give but not if you don't receive it. You don't want to make it hard, but many of us tend to feel guilty when someone genuinely wants to help us.
Guilty as well as not worthy, right?
Yeah.
Or not deserving. And all of our listeners will remember that Sherry once acknowledged within our episodes that we still struggle on Team Sherry to receive compliments, right?
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
You've gotten so much better of it over the years, but it was something that you had to really work on because, like so many good-hearted women and good-hearted men are the same way, we kind of shove it off. And it happened to me, and I have to remind myself the same thing. Happened to me, somebody just the other day complimented me on an article I had written, and I had to force myself, "Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it." I had to experience the discomfort of that spotlight, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. But can you break that down for us? Why does that happen? I mean, I think it's unconscious.
Oh, it's definitely unconscious. And as you know, and all of our listeners know, our unconscious emotional mind is the one that's driving the bus, right? And it's driving the bus based on the guide rules that we created when we were two, three, four, five, six, and seven. Because receiving activates guilt. And one of the reasons, or discomfort at the very least, is because it violates the old emotional rules I was talking about that we created in childhood, that were the perfect coping and defense mechanisms at that time to remain as safe as possible within our environment. And receiving triggers fear of maybe disappointing others, or like we are now in debt
Mhm.
because we're not worthy of just receiving it without reply, so to speak. It challenges our identity of having to be the strong one in so many good-hearted women. If we have taught ourselves that we have to be the strong one, well, if somebody helps us, we can interpret that as meaning that we are weak because we need the help. It disrupts a pattern of self sacrifice in some people where we have, almost from those coping defense mechanisms when in childhood our needs didn't matter, Sherry. And so now we have learned to have to almost be an internal martyr where we are doing without because we're basing it on the rules where it didn't matter what we needed or wanted, we weren't going to get them. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Wow.
And in others, it threatens the emotional equilibrium, the balance of relationships. Because if we unconsciously, as a good hearted woman, are having a perspective that in a relationship, we are the submitter and somebody does something for us, it almost creates a sense of imbalance. And if we are the leader in one, it can do the same thing because all of those are based on what our earlier beliefs were. And in others, it forces vulnerability. And that is a very tender emotion that is scarier than hell for the unconscious emotional mind. And that sometimes can require that we're supposed to now trust the person that helped or gave. It's all a result of the conditioning of the primary occurrence of learning in those earlier years. And as you know, Sherry, in my coaching, I call those our school rules, right?
Mhm.
We form them in our childhood as the primary occurrence of learning, my acronyms, and continue to use them and all through our adult life to our detriment because they're no longer needed like they were in childhood. And that's why we need to write new rules.
Wow. It's so powerful. As you were saying all those things, I'm thinking back to my grandmother, and she would never let herself be in debt to anybody. If they did a favor for her, she had to return it immediately. So I think what you're saying is guilt isn't a sign that receiving is wrong. It's a sign that receiving is unfamiliar. It's just old conditioning that exists.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And our unconscious emotional mind, anything unfamiliar or foreign is perceived as a threat. And many of our listeners have heard this before in other episodes, but our unconscious emotional mind's primary directive is merely to preserve our emotional existence. And therefore, it will experience and re experience the same doggone conscious emotional pain if it's familiar,
Mhm.
even though it might be consciously damaging to us. It will take anything that is unfamiliar or foreign that it has not experienced as an absolute threat, even if we consciously think it's something we want or something that could be good. Unconsciously, it is a threat if we have never achieved or experienced the feeling. It's fascinating and it's very enlightening to all of my coaching clients and a lot of the listeners that have made mention of it because it's something that you have mentioned, Sherry, over the years. you really have a hard time believing at different times that our unconscious emotional mind overrides our intellectual brain, right?
It's so annoying to me. And this feels like a glitch in our system, like it's broken.
Exactly. It feels like a glitch, feels like it's broken. And that glitch that we, are talking about is the unconscious emotional mind and the intellectual brain and the conscious emotional mind all having a conflict. And that's what results in our emotional discomfort. It's when there is a confrontation between the three. But the unconscious emotional mind is always going to win,
Hmm.
and it's always going to be based on what we learned as our belief systems, as our coping and defense mechanisms based in our childhood until we create new and adopt new pool rules for our adult life.
Hmm.
You know, guilt is one of those. And guilt in this example from receiving, it's not a moral compass. It Guilt is a pattern, one that we learned we needed to have during those earlier years to feel as safe as possible within our environment, and we just bring it forward into adulthood.
Hmm. I mean, it makes sense. A lot of us were praised for overgiving, self sacrifice, and we did that for so long that receiving is just unfamiliar. So I understand it logically. It still is frustrating to me. But
Mhm.
so are there, I'm wondering as you're saying that, are there different types of receiving that women struggle with? Because comes to mind, I'm thinking of gifts or help. Are there others too?
Oh, yeah, and you will resonate greatly with a couple of these, Sherry, based on our coaching. The first one is receiving praise. You know, women tend to deflect it. Good-hearted women might say, "Oh, it was nothing," or, if they get praised for doing, some good job on in work or in personal life, whatever. "Oh, I just got lucky." Can you relate to that?
Mm-hmm.
And it may sound crazy, Sherry. Well, it won't to you, but might to our listeners. But if I go into the hardware store or I go into a grocery store and I need help from a clerk to find something, and I am so appreciative when they do because so often we can't get anybody to help nowadays. But if they are really helpful, I'll say, "Thank you so much." And so often the first thing, especially young women, will say, "Oh, it was nothing." And I will stop right there, and it drives my wife nuts if she's with me. I will stop them right now, and I said, "Please don't ever say that again. It was something. Please just now from now on say, 'I'm glad to help.'" I am not kidding, and I would encourage every single listener to do it every time they have a clerk, a cashier, somebody in a store that helps them. Don't let anybody get away by saying it was nothing, because when they say it was nothing, it is immediately confirming a belief system within their unconscious emotional mind that they have no worth. If they say it was nothing, they don't get any worth for it internally.
Mhm.
And so I have them say, "I'm glad to help you," or "I'm glad I was able to help." The second one,
I
yeah,
was going to
go
say it
ahead.
gets easier too. I can accept compliments now for the most part. And sometimes I have to make myself think of it, but it's just practicing it, I think.
It is. And I remember one of the big sessions that you and I had such growth in that it really clicked.
Hmm.
And you knew from that moment forward, and I remember you mentioning it so many times over the years since, that it automatically triggered, "Oh, this is the discomfort I used to feel,"
Hmm.
or even still have a little bit of it, but you still allow yourself to, "Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that." And that's one of the many reasons I am so proud of the work that you have done and achieved, from our work together.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you. So the second one that you were wondering about, the second one I would say is receiving help. So often good-hearted women feel like burdens, and the burden is the one that they're only supposed to carry alone. It's unfortunate. Third one might be receiving rest. Okay, good hearted women feel lazy or unproductive so commonly. Sherry, my wife Debbie, she works so diligently during the week in a career that is absolutely a passion for her. But you know what happens if there's a snow day or an ice day? She has to do something productive at home. She literally will not feel good unless every weekend she has spent 7 or 8 hours split up over the weekend doing something in some type of work. And if I beg her to sit down and relax, it really will make her feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Can you relate?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of these, right? I think all of these women have them to some degree.
Yep. Another one's receiving love. Good hearted women feel unworthy or suspicious when attempting to receive love and receiving opportunities. So often, good hearted women feel like imposters,
Yes.
right?
I think, yeah, I think suspicious would be the one for me. What do you want from me?
Right? And inherently, that really means I'm really not worthy, right? Or I am suspect of you thinking I'm worthy enough for what you're trying to give to me. So what's behind the curtain that you're hiding?
That
Right?
one. That one.
And I will be quite open with all of our listeners. Sometimes that is the result of experience because unfortunately, and again, I'm never here to man bash, but I will say there are a lot of men who aren't necessarily that upfront with their motivations in regards to women and thus can have a history of needing to be a little suspicious. Would you agree?
Yeah. True. Yeah, I think recognizing those are all important. And I know I can still struggle with receiving help, but it's not because I feel like a burden. It's because I want to be independent. And I think just growing up in this society where women were less than, I have to prove I don't need your help. I don't need your help.
But tied to that is an emotional rule that you inherited in your childhood, is it not?
Yeah. So you're,
It is it is exactly the continuation of what you shared with us about your grandmother, is it not?
oh, yeah. Don't want to be in debt to anybody. So you're saying all of these are tied to emotional rules that we inherited. Is there something we can do about it? Because that, again, I don't like to be carrying this stuff.
Absolutely, there's something that we can do about it. We can rewrite those pool rules. We can develop the new ones for our adult because it is absolutely fascinating. And ladies that are listening, I am so thrilled that you just heard that example where Sherry actually was contributing to the conversation, but thinking that she was actually having a scenario where she wasn't a burden, but yet carrying on the proof of exactly what we're talking about, right, Sherry?
Hmm.
That we're carrying those emotional rules. And this is magnificent because not only did you share that, but you shared that not realizing that this is so tied to what you shared about your grandmother earlier on in the episode.
Right?
Fascinating. It's fascinating. Ladies, I really want you to take hold of that because that is what we do. And it goes back to that ham story, Sherry.
Oh, yeah.
For all of the people that may have, you think it's worth repeating that one, or they can hear it on other episodes? Because this is an exact example of that, is it not?
It is. We carry them on without knowing why.
I'm going to tell it again for anybody that didn't hear that episode, and I will make it short. Easter morning, little girl Amy is looking at her mom. Her mom is preparing the Easter ham. She cuts off a chunk of 3 inches of meat, sticks it on the platter, and sticks it in the oven. And the little girl Amy says, "Mom, why did you cut off a 3 inch piece of meat off of the end of the ham before you put it in the oven?" Thinks about it for a second and says, "I don't know. Go ask your grandma. She always did it." So Amy goes over to grandma. Grandma, Mom just cut off 3 inches a piece of meat off the end of the ham before sticking it in the oven. She doesn't know why she did it. I asked her why. She said, you always did it. So, Grandma, why did you cut off 3 inches off the end of the piece of Easter ham? Grandmother says, honey, I don't really know. Go ask your great grandmother. She's right over there. She always did it. So Amy goes over to great grandma and says, great grandma, I asked mom why she cut off a chunk of the end of the ham before putting it in the oven. She said she doesn't know. She said her mother always did it. So I asked grandma. She said, you always did it. They didn't know why. So great grandma, why did you cut off 3 inches a piece of ham before sticking it in the oven? And the great grandmother says, because I didn't have a pan long enough.
I do love that story.
Right?
Yeah.
And ladies and whatever gentlemen that are listening, this is exactly the scenario that unwittingly Sherry shared about how we pull these things without us even knowing it into adulthood that we learned in childhood. And this is what we have to change. And we have to change it, not because we ever did anything wrong, because what we did in our childhood and those rules we created were perfect. I guarantee you, every single one of you, every good hearted woman that is listening, the rules we created in our childhood were perfect for our circumstances, but we're no longer in those circumstances. So we no longer have to have those emotional patterns, those emotional rules, and those emotional debts. And that's why we have to change from our primary occurrence of learning in those earlier years, our pool rules, into creating our new pool rules. And that is about one of the examples that we're talking about today is how to receive without guilt.
Okay.
And there are steps to be able to do that, Sherry.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's change this.
Number one, name the guilt. Don't obey it. We have to say internally to ourselves, literally say to ourselves inside, this is guilt. It's a pattern. It's not a truth. And ladies, guilt cannot ever, ever exist without the ingredient of fear. And when we feel guilt, it's because we're afraid of something. We say internally, this is guilt. It's a pattern, not a truth. We can then say, wonder what the fear is that I'm trying to hide from. Step two, Sherry, identify the emotional rule that is being triggered or activated. And I'll give you an example. We hear ourselves saying, I shouldn't need help, or thinking it. We hear ourselves say, I should be strong. We hear ourselves say, or actually vocalize it to somebody, I shouldn't inconvenience anyone, or I should earn everything and don't deserve anything for free.
Hmm.
Those are emotional rules being triggered, being activated. When we hear those in ourselves or somebody else, that is a sign that we need to move forward.
Hmm.
Step three, we have to replace the rule with an empowered truth. In a recent episode, Sherry, I mentioned to you and to all of our listeners that we can never, ever change a belief system or a belief habit without having one to replace it. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
An example was the first time that I mentioned the ham story. Amy in that ham story would have continued had she not asked and she had noticed, she would have continued to cut off 3 inches off the piece of ham for her life. And if she had a son or a daughter who liked to cook and watched her do it, they would continue that same process because they create an unconscious allegiance to their hierarchy or their caretakers. Does that make sense?
It does.
In an earlier episode, I mentioned how I will still tear a paper towel in half if I only need to use a little portion of it in deference to my mother who has been dead for 15 years. And I will feel guilty if I use the whole paper towel. No, I don't fight that. It's such a small thing. I still continue to do it because it makes me think of my mom. But when we bring something around that brings it forward, that creates detriment in our life, that's when we have to do it. And so an example of Replacing that rule with an empowered truth is us being able to say to ourselves, you know, receiving help is not weak. It strengthens our connection with someone. And another example is we can say to ourselves, rest is a requirement. Every good hearted woman wants everybody that she cares about to rest when they had been working, when they're exhausted. So we have to be able to say to ourselves, rest is a requirement. It's not a reward. And we have to be able to say, I am allowed to be supported. When somebody or multiple people want to acknowledge, Sherry, the ways that you have changed their lives, or the other good hearted women that are out there, let them support us. I am allowed to be supported because you're already supporting everybody in your world, aren't you, ladies?
Hmm.
And then another one is, I deserve good things, not because what I did. Oh, I'm getting fired up. I can hear my decibels changing. I deserve good things because I exist, not because I've done something. And I may sound like a broken record, Sherry, for all of our ladies, but I don't think that people can hear this too much. And that is, ladies, you are good hearted. And you're good hearted not because of your deeds. The deeds you do are because you're good hearted. You do not have to earn your good heartedness. It is because you already are,
Yeah. I like all of those. All of those are very powerful statements for ourselves. Hmm.
right? Step 4, we have to start to practice micro receiving. Sherry, you said it a few minutes ago when you said it takes practice to accept those compliments once we know that we need to. And it's true. We have to start small. We have to start, like Sherry said, accept a compliment without deflecting. It's uncomfortable at first, but once we realize that we need to, our unconscious emotional mind is already beginning to help us with the transition to meet our conscious emotional mind. So just accept it without deflecting. You don't even have to say thank you right away. If it's really, really uncomfortable, just stand there, don't move. Ignore the likelihood of being able to say, oh, it was nothing. No, it was something. It was because you are good hearted. Right, Siri?
Yeah. Just stand there and stare at them if you can't say thank you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You may look like a robot, but you can't ignore it and you can't deflect it. Okay, ladies? Let somebody hold the door for you. And that, by the way, that does not have to be like the old chauvinist crap that men must lead and own women. No, this is about common decency. Men hold doors for other men, women hold doors for women. Let somebody hold the door for you. This is one that's big for me, Sherry. I'm constantly the one holding the door, and I have to let somebody, and it's so often I'll go, "Oh, no, no, you first." Same way. It happens with men too, but ladies, it's way more frequent with you. Next time somebody asks you to or offers you to help you, ladies, say yes, no matter how uncomfortable it is, unless you don't want them in your house. Rest without apologizing. Try it. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but you deserve it. You deserve it because you are. Allow yourself to just be. You do not need to earn just to be good hearted. You are already good hearted. Next, allow someone to care for you. You're doing it for everybody else. Somebody's sick, you're already bringing them soup. Somebody passes away, their relative, you're already aligning all of the friends to get together in support. You're freaking magnificent at this. So allow somebody to care for you. Let them give the gift. And instead of feeling that we are indebted, feel that we are giving them the gift of being able to give to us. If you need to look at it that way, you're giving it to them. Allowing them to give to you is a gift you can give to them. Does that make sense, Sherry?
It does. And I really love this idea of micro receiving, sort of practicing and getting used to it.
Absolutely. Step five, build emotional safety around receiving. Because receiving does require trust. It requires vulnerability. It requires openness, but it also requires boundary and self permission. That does not mean we give everything away as we receive. It does not mean we have to rewire our conditions of letting somebody in. It just means that we can be still safe while receiving. Then we need to anchor to our new identity. Sherry, before you mentioned that, like your grandma and all of these different things create our identity. And for her, it was, I am a woman who will never be indebted to somebody, right?
Hmm.
We must create our new identity and anchor to it as though we are sticking a stake in the ground and we're tying ourselves to it like an old tetherball and say, I am a woman who receives without guilt. I am a woman who receives without guilt.
Love it. I love it. Following these steps can be a powerful identity shift.
Because receiving is not a skill. It's truly an identity. It shifts our perspective of who we are. And all of a sudden, when we do these things and we help our unconscious emotional mind transition into what our conscious emotional mind wants to believe, it's empowering.
Mhm.
It is freedom, as Sherry so often will
Mm.
say.
I have experienced this, and it's a big deal because once someone truly believes they're allowed to receive, their entire energy changes, and you can attract so much good at that point.
Oh, you're spot on as usual. When a good-hearted woman learns to receive, Sherry just get brought up an exact example, and listeners may have heard it on a previous episode where when she found this transition to occur, all sorts of new people started flocking around her, and they were positively grounded. They were looking for her, almost the energy and the output of what Sherry, instead of taking the energy that was used inside to remain sane through some of her trials and tribulations, that when she transitioned into being the she that she was supposed to be, people flocked and young women would see her as a role model, not that, and Sherry wasn't, you weren't expecting this that, and you weren't promoting that, but that's what you experienced, right?
Mhm. And that, not only the people, that has transferred into opportunities as well.
Yes. One of the big ones, and I won't go too deep into the personal aspect, but previously you felt that you could not do something, and then you took upon yourself and took an opportunity within your career, and not only is that, yes, I can do that, but man, you've knocked it out of the park.
Mhm. Turns out I'm good at it.
Turns out you're great at it. And this is what happens when a good-hearted woman learns to be empowered. And in this example, she's learning to receive,
Yeah.
because then your relationships become more balanced.
Hmm.
Your boundaries become clearer, right, Sherry?
Yeah,
You now actually have more empowerment and strength to actually hold to the boundaries because you deserve it.
it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. It's amazing. It's an amazing life now. I do wonder though, you said something about relationships and I wonder, if we're changing our identity, does receiving change our relationships too
Ah,
that we already had?
oh boy, does it.
Yeah.
Anytime we grow, it can change our relationship. And sometimes, unfortunately, we discover, depending upon our growth and depending upon where we're coming from and where we come to in the process of becoming more of the she that we were meant to be, as our tagline, the relationships absolutely can change because we can discover that we were with somebody who sought us for who we were. And perhaps felt that they unconsciously needed to be the dominant. And when we become empowered, we don't want that anymore. We're not willing to accept that. And so often when I have a client, and I referenced one a couple of episodes ago, where I graduated my client, as you know, Sherry, when I work with somebody and we get to the goals, I graduate them. It's not supposed to be a lifelong coaching experience. And so they came back to me, or she came back to me a year and a half later to work on them as a couple. Now, fantastically, the man in the relationship was absolutely willing to learn and grow because his relationship was that important to him.
Mm.
But a lot of time, ladies, you want to find out that we kind of ignored a few red flags that we would never, ever do once we become more of our empowered self. Would you agree with that, Sherry?
Yeah, I think, the people are either going to level up to your new vibration or they're going to move away.
Or we might have to kick them out,
That too.
right? You know, in a recent episode, I mentioned it might have been deserving, Sherry, but the result is the same. When, in answer to your question, when we learn to receive or our identity changes in other ways, if we don't do it, we're kind of like saying, I wonder why strangers keep walking into our house after we've left the door open,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? We can't wonder it if we don't have the different boundaries. That boundary can be for ourselves that I must learn to receive either graciously, wholeheartedly, emphatically, and believe that I am worthy.
Yeah.
When we learn to receive, our emotional exhaustion is going to fade away for that good-hearted woman who has never done it before. You know, the connections deepen for the healthy relationships that we have. And Sherry, that good-hearted woman's self-worth begins to stabilize, if not increase. Receiving is not selfish, ladies. It is relational. It is grounded within a connection. Does that make sense?
Uh, oh my God, I love it. Receiving is not selfish. I'm just going to repeat that again because it's so important because it's an automatic feeling that a lot of us have, but it's not selfish.
Exactly. And when we use selfish in that example, we're meaning that it's not too selfish because we know not all selfish is bad, right, Sherry?
Right.
There's a healthy selfish, and that's part of learning to receive is being the healthy selfish, acknowledging that we have some worth to enjoy and appreciate the receiving, right?
Yep. And we deserve it without guilt.
Exactly. Receiving is not taking, receiving is not burdening, receiving is not selfish, receiving is not weakness. Receiving is participation, it's connection, it's emotional security, and it's emotional maturity. And it's really self worth in action.
Gosh, I love it. It's life changing. It really is. If you adopt these rules and take those steps, it can be really life changing.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. Good hearted women were never meant to survive on emotional crumbs that fall from the table of life, Sherry.
Emotional crumbs. That's a good one.
Right?
Yeah.
They were meant to receive fully, openly, and without apology.
Love it. Amen. Amen. Thank you, David. I appreciate today's and thank you everyone for joining us on Her Discovered Power. If this episode spoke to you, please share it, to remind other women that receiving doesn't make us selfish or weak. And we'll see you on the next episode of Her Discovered Power.
Thank you, Sherry, and for all of good hearted women that are listening. Thank you for tuning in yet to another episode. Sherry and I are here always to try to help every good hearted woman be the she that she was meant to be. And so please do share and subscribe or any of those tech terms that that Sherry knows about that I don't. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Sherry. I wouldn't want to do it with anybody else. And remember, ladies, you are allowed to receive good things. Right, Sherry?
Right. Thank you, David.
Thank you. See you next time.